What is up, everybody? Dev times are here. We done did them already. Full disclaimer at the start of this video, all of these times are actually doable with acceleration, but there are about 3 or 4 of them that are basically within frames of the acceleration world record, and for some of them I really didn't feel like playing over and over to try to get close to those times, so I switched to speed instead. If you see me using Megumi, I was playing as speed, and all of the other ones are as acceleration. At the start of each track, I'll show an attempt counter that it took me, and then I'll also show the time that it's required, and I'll also try to give some tips. Mostly these tips are not going to be super useful if you're really struggling with these tracks, but if you're kind of close and need a little extra push, they might be able to help out a little bit. I'm going to try to spare you guys the long intro. At the end of the video, I will talk more candidly about the dev times, because I had a lot of questions asking me how I felt about the dev times. So, without further ado, we're going to start off with Crash Cove. So, starting off with Crash Cove, we got 1:19.74. This only took me a couple tries, honestly. It's 1 frame off of the world record for acceleration, so I didn't even try it with Excel, I just went straight to speed. In general, all this track is just keep your fire the whole time and cut corners as close as possible. There's nothing super crazy that you gotta do. The second track is Mystery Caves with a 2 minutes and 62 milliseconds time. This time is honestly pretty easy even for Excel. My personal best is like 2.5 seconds faster as it is. Really the only super big advice I can give is mostly avoid the turtles when you can, and if you go left on the first set of turtles, it'll make your life a little bit easier when taking that first inner shortcut. Aside from that, remember that you can cut on the inside of the fireballs and hold your fire and you will be golden. Third track is Sewer Speedway, 147.57. This one's not so bad either. It's pretty much just, again, hold your fire and cut the corners as close as possible. Best advice I can give is to literally just study the barrel cycles, because those are going to be your worst enemy as you're going for this.
It might be time for an upgrade.
Ruse Tubes with a 116.87. Okay, this track is actually fairly simple if you play as Speed. This would have only taken me like 1 or 2 attempts, if even. With acceleration, it's pretty close to world record, so good luck with that if you're trying to use something other than speed. In general, just keep fire, cut the corners as close as possible. The developer ghost doesn't even go for the inner section at the end, which kind of helps explain why the walls are so god-awful in that inner SC, so here we are. But if you go for the inner SC and you don't lose your fire, then that is a big time save over the developer ghost as well. Slide Coliseum with a 140.96. This time is pretty good actually, partially just because Slide is a kind of complex track and not too many people have practiced it too much, so it does handle a little bit differently from all the other tracks. Best tip I can give you is to literally just get yellow fire as soon as possible. The way I start off the track is going 1 power slide to the left and then 3 to the right. Once you get the 3rd power slide getting a perfect boost, you get yellow fire, and from there you just want to hold on to that as much as possible. In general, you do corner cuts through the grass and you just jump through the grass when you're doing the corner cuts over the tires. IMO, just try to jump early on the little ramp section and then don't cut it as tight, because the low jumps are a little bit faster in my opinion, but I could be wrong, but it's how I handled it. Turbo Track with a 133.52. Now if you look at the attempts here, you're probably going to see that this is where things start to spike a little bit. Took me 27 attempts, I actually had to get a personal best to beat this time. This is the first ghost that you really see doing U-turns, which is kind of cool in my opinion to see that they not only did them, but they executed them pretty well during that S section. Your main time that you can actually make up is going to be at the end of lap 3. The dev time loses its fire and kind of goes wide on a bunch of turns. So if you're behind the ghost for the majority of the race, don't give up. Again, at the very end is where you're going to see most of the mistakes that you can capitalize on. Other than that, all I can say is ground U-turns are slightly faster during the S section, and the main thing you want to do is just build up reserves so you can do that S section without losing fire, or if you do lose fire during it, just try to get it back as soon as possible. Coco Park 118.27. This one's not bad at all if you're using speed. As you can see, I first tried it. It's actually probably not super bad with Excel either. I just really didn't feel like putting in the effort for it. Only real tips to give is just getting the boost pad at the very end of the track is going to be faster than getting any of the earlier ones. If you go for the second boost pad, it's only slightly slower, so that shouldn't be a huge deal. But again, the very last one is probably the one that you want to go for. And again, just cut your corners as much as possible. Tiger Temple 130.35. Alright, so I started this one right off with speed as well. Not because it's not doable with Excel. The Excel world record is like 3 seconds faster than this one, but I'm not super good at the grass cut, so I knew it was going to take a little bit of effort if I wanted to do it with Excel, and I didn't feel like doing that. The dev time itself actually does the fast grass on laps 2 and 3, which is pretty neat, but it doesn't quite do it perfectly, so it loses all of its speed towards the very end of the grass. So if you actually do the grass in the same way that I do in this run, you should be able to still pass it up without any problems. Other than that, just get fire as soon as possible, take the shortcut all 3 times, don't hit the fire obstacle, and you should be golden.
Like a little hard work.
Papu Pyramid with a 130.52. This one's pretty easy, honestly. I honestly don't even know where the dev time loses all of its time because it was behind me the majority of the time. Spiral section's pretty hard, but in general, just get your fire, hold it, take all the shortcuts, and you're fine. If you want to, you can do the extreme grass cut that I do, but I don't think it's really necessary because my time is like 4 seconds faster than the dev time. Dingo Canyon with a 1:31:49. This one's also pretty easy, honestly. The dev time actually goes for the inner shortcut at the beginning, which is actually faster, but it's a little bit more risky, and you can definitely see how much more risky it is with the dev time on lap 2 because it loses its fire while trying to do that inner SC. So personally, I prefer to do the outer one. It's a little bit slower, but it's also a lot easier. And again, you just get your fire and you hang on to it the whole time and you should be set. Polar Pass with a 2:09:99. You're gonna see all of the Warp 3 tracks I did in literally one attempt. They're all pretty simple, honestly. This one's no different. I think you can honestly get away with not even doing the Mega Lake SC on lap 2 and 3. Actually, I don't think the Dev Ghost does it, so you definitely don't have to. Other than that, doing the right side on the figure 8 is generally a little bit easier because it requires less U-turning, and then aside from that, really there's not too much else to say. You just get your fire as soon as possible, hold it the whole time, and you're set. Tiny Arena with a 309.32. Okay, this is probably the absolute easiest dev time of the entire set. If you're looking to just kind of get your feet wet and beat some of them, I would definitely suggest this one. This one's about 20 whole seconds slower than the world record, and the thing that gets me is that it's even slower than the Electron Avenue dev ghost, which is really just surprising to me because Electron Avenue tends to take a longer time to finish than Tiny Arena. Nothing super insane that you gotta do in terms of, being able to beat the dev time, but I will give one little tip of something that makes life a little bit easier during the early S section. We do something that I refer to as a drop boost, which is where you do a hang time boost, you land directly into a power slide, and then when you go off of a ramp again, you're continuing to hold that power slide, you let off in the midair, and then you restart the power slide as you land. You get a hang time boost still from that last jump that you got. We utilize this during that first really long whoop section where you'll see me basically power slide left and right, then left and right off of the ramps. That's to build a bunch of reserves so you can just kind of drive through that little S section. But it's definitely not necessary because the time in general is pretty simple.
Time for an upgrade.
Next up is Dragon Mines, 119.17. This one only took me one attempt. This one's not super bad, honestly, but I expect a lot of people to struggle with it. It's the first time you're basically required to actually take the minecart shortcut. If you really need a lot of help with this track, I made a track guide for it. Other than that, get fire, cut corners, take the shortcut, and good luck.
Woohoo!
Blizzard Bluff with a 114.07. This one also requires you to actually do the shortcuts. 114.07 though is actually kind of slow, and if you watch the dev time you'll see why. On lap 3 it actually kind of gets hung up on the little fence. So if you want a really good tip, just pay attention to where I'm taking that shortcut. There is a very consistent spot that you can jump from that gives you a nice, pretty fast jump, and it will always clear it. So I do one jump into the off-road and then a second one in the very specific spot every single time. It always works 100% consistent, not clickbait. Other than that, get fire as soon as possible, cut corners, take shortcuts, easy clap. Air Skyway with a 213.49. This one's not super crazy. I'd say it's pretty solid though. Just gotta U-turn that hairpin. Best advice I can give during that section is just kind of start wide and then power slide to the left and then basically let off of your power slide as you do the jump. This will preemptively orientate your cart to the left a little bit, making that jump a little bit easier to U-turn through. I know the cloud cut is a little bit intimidating. I don't think it's actually necessary to beat this time, but it will make your time a lot easier if you're trying to go for it. So really just kind of aim for the corner of that wood section if you want, or you can go a little bit later than that, then jump and then just kind of cut across. It's really that simple, no joke. It's one of those that look really intimidating, but it's actually pretty easy. Cortex Castle with a 1:57:44. This one's actually pretty impressive. I was surprised to see that they actually got a good time for this one. In this video, you're going to see that I actually do like the spider cuts. I pretty much never go for those, and they're definitely not necessary. But in general, just don't lose your blue fire. Tip number 1, that's probably the biggest one, is on the blue fire pad, you can double tap it to get twice as many reserves. That's a big deal. Number 2, in the courtyard section, going on the right hand is slightly faster, albeit a little bit harder. If you can't handle it, just go to the left. It's not a big deal. And then number 3, obviously, is you really should be U-turning during the C section and then the courtyard section. It'll make your life a lot easier. Engine Labs with a 2:16:24. So 2:16 is pretty simple, honestly. Engine Labs is a pretty easy track. Just do your corner cuts as much as possible. Get your blue fire as soon as possible. Also, important note, there are actually 2 speeds of blue fire on this track. The first pad is the fastest. If you lose your fire in the tube by hitting the wall, you're actually going to have a slower blue fire. So keep that in mind. Oxide Station 24840. I expect a lot of people to struggle with this one. This one's actually, it's not honestly that hard if you can hold fire, but holding fire on this track can be a little bit tricky. If you can hold blue fire the entire time, this time shouldn't be super hard, honestly. But if you can't, then it might be a little bit difficult. There's honestly not too many big tips I can give except for just follow the lines as close as possible, honestly. And that ends all of the CTR tracks. We now move into the CNK tracks, and these are all mostly fairly easy as well. We're going to start off with Inferno Island, which I was kind of concerned that it would be a repeat of Crash Cove, being something that I might have needed to use speed for, but I was wrong. It's a 135.93, which I was able to pull off in my first attempt at Excel. Nothing super crazy about this course because it's pretty much just an oval. Just get the fire as soon as possible and cut your lines as much as possible from there. Jungle Boogie with a 1:16:11. Super similar case, not crazy, just get your fire as soon as possible, cut corners. There's not really even any spots that you need to U-turn either. It's a generally simple track, so this one should not be super hard. Clockwork Wumpa with a 1:55:71. This is a pretty good time, honestly. I don't want to make the attempt counter make it seem like it's not. It only took me a couple attempts though, so it's not like super difficult, but I would definitely say it's a respectable time. In general, I would say be careful around the cogs. Those things can be kind of brutal if you get too close to them. And other than that, I don't think there's anything super insane that I'm doing, so I would really just say watch the video and try to follow the lines or maybe the boost routes there. Android Alley with a 2:34:68. This is honestly also a pretty respectable time in my opinion, but because the track is so long, there's a decent amount of time for you to make a gap between yourself and the ghost if you're slightly better with lines. This first right sweeper is a corner that you can kind of grind against, and other than that, nothing super insane here.
time for an upgrade.
Electron Avenue with a 308.89. This time is also not super crazy, I'd say. I don't do the speed ghost, and I was able to do it in one try, so do with that what you will. Hairpin cut can be kind of hard. I would say just power slide to the right into it and then U-turn during it. Makes your life a little bit easier. And other than that, just pay attention to the laser cycles and don't fall off. And of course, don't lose fire. Deep sea driving with a 142.17. Alright, full disclaimer, I cannot stand deep sea driving. I was very concerned about this time. Especially when I saw it, I thought I was gonna have to struggle on it for a little while, but it came pretty easily. There are not very many tips I can even give for this course. First of all, if you aren't already aware, there's multiple speeds of blue fire. This one has a huge difference between those speeds. The first pad that you get basically gives you the fastest speed in the entire course, and you want to be able to hold that the entire time. If you lose it, you lose a bunch of time. Even if you don't lose it, you can still have issues beating the dev time because the dev time is actually pretty good. In general, just pay attention to the fan blades and adjust accordingly. If you are on a certain pace and then you hit a fan blade, take note of where that fan blade was, restart, and then remember it next time. That's really all I can say. Thunderstruck with a 205.59. I was going to say that this one would be pretty easy for most people, but blue fire tracks can be kind of difficult, so maybe not. 205 is pretty easy to beat. Sub 2 in general, if you can hold fire the whole time, is not honestly that hard. Going back to what we said on deep sea driving, there's more than one speed of blue fire. Get the first one that you get basically off of that first big ramp, hold that the whole time. Everything else is slower and you're going to lose a bunch of time. You can beat this dev time without even doing that shortcut that I'm doing at the start of the lap during lap 2 and 3, but it's faster and it might make your life a little bit easier if you're really struggling to beat it.
It might be time for an upgrade.
Tiny Temple with a 140.23. Okay, so Tiny Temple is a generally simple track. There's not really much complex going on with it, so as long as you get the blue fire and hold on to it, don't lose reserves, you're pretty much set. You might need to cut some lines a little bit. The thing that I would say that helped me cut a little bit of time is when you're doing this big jump kind of towards the middle where there's the shortcut on the left. You can actually just jump from the ramp and clear it all the way to the shortcut when you have blue fire. That'll save you a little bit of time. It's not even massive, but every little bit counts. Meteor Gorge 124.78. Easy time for speed, a little bit harder for Excel. In general, just do the snowbank cuts, jump in the same spots I am in the video. That's really all I could say. There's nothing super technical about those spots that I'm jumping from. They just work. So do with that what you will. It took me a few attempts to beat as Excel, but if you're playing as speed, not a big deal. Barin Ruins with a 144.07. Similar case with Meteor Gorge. With Excel, it's kind of difficult. With speed, it's pretty easy. Not too much going on with this course. You can actually cut on the snowbank at the very beginning if you did not know. That'll save you a little bit of time. Other than that, just basically cut corners as much as possible and hold the fire the whole time and you are golden. Out of time with a 154.61. Y'all thought that velo time was gonna be nuts, huh? Yeah, this is a lot closer to what an optimized time of out of time is. I would say that this is in general a pretty good time. It only took me a few resets to beat, and most of those resets was actually because I was just messing with the new collisions, because some of the collisions were changed on a lot of the tracks, and I was kind of testing the waters with some of them because out of time was one of the worst for invisible walls. I made a very very in-depth guide about Out of Time. If you really need help with that one, I would definitely suggest watching that instead. In general, I'll say just get the Sacred Fire off of the ramps at the beginning, then do your U-turns on the necessary sections, take the inside cut on that big jump towards the middle, and don't lose your blue fire basically at all. The end. Assembly lane with a 228.38. Okay, don't let the attempts fool you. Honestly, this time isn't that crazy. Most of my resets were because the game, for whatever reason, did not want to give me jump inputs on the conveyor belt section, so I don't know. I just don't. It took me way too long to do this time, and it actually kind of annoyed me that it took this long. Take the conveyor belt, cut your lines as much as possible, don't get squished, hold your fire, the end. There's really not too much crazy going on with this one. Hyper Spaceway with a 148.64. Okay. So, also a very good time, not gonna lie. Like genuinely, sub 150 is respectable in my opinion in general. So, hats off, for 1. For 2, with Excel, pretty hard in general. For 3, you can get away with not doing the same side figure 8 section. My hands simply just don't work anymore apparently, and I cannot do the same side figure 8 very well at all. So you can get away with doing like left right or right left and you'll still be fine even if you're playing as an Excel. If you're playing as Speed, even better for you. Get your fast blue fire. There's multiple speeds on this one. Your fast blue fire is the one after the figure 8 section. Hold that the entire time. Don't lose it. And in general, just pay attention to the video and you'll basically have all the tips that you need.
natural.
Twilight Tour with a 214.80. This one, apparently a lot of people struggle with the Velo time. A lot of people didn't know that there's multiple blue fire speeds on this track. In the marketplace, at the very end basically, when you do the jump up, that is a faster blue fire pad. Hit that, hold it the whole time, not super hard. With Excel, you have to have a little bit of better lining, but it's not super crazy. Prehistoric Playground with a 228.78. Okay, for the majority of these upcoming tracks, you're gonna see a trend here. One, I hate Prehistoric Playground. I absolutely cannot stand this track. It is a pain for me. The spiral section feels like ass. This one I had to PB by about an entire second to beat, so it took a while. So general tip is obviously there's a blue fire pad right at the start on the left, but more than that is the faster blue fire pad. If you lose blue fire basically right at the end on the spiral and you get it again on that like last big jump, that big jump is slower, so I mean in general you won't be able to keep up if you lose fire anyways, so you should probably reset. But if you can hold your fire the whole time and you're playing at speed, it's not super insane, but it's also still going to be a challenge. Other than that, all I can say is watch the video and good luck. And if my video doesn't help you out enough, go watch the world record. Spyro Circuit 212.66. Yet another course that is basically frames off of the acceleration world record. This one took 34 attempts for me to beat, generally pretty hard. Similar with all the other figure eights, going left is going to be faster than like left or left through the center. At the very beginning, basically go left on that figure eight to get Sacred Fire very slightly early, which is kind of a big deal, and it's going to be the make or break if you're trying to play as Excel. Other than that, do your corner cuts, don't lose fire, the end.
today. I'm a natural.
Nina's Nightmare with a 150.28. Also a very respectable time. Honestly, I didn't expect to be able to beat this in 2 attempts, but here we are. Blue fire, it's the only blue fire pad on the entire track. Take your fence cut, don't hit the green stuff, take the lines as tight as possible. There isn't too much crazy going on that I can give tips on, just don't lose your fire and cut the lines as close as possible. Koala Carnival with a 139.96. This one, I used speed. You can definitely use Excel for this, it is possible, but it is a pain if you want to get it. It's about 1/3 of a second slower than the acceleration world record, so again, possible, but I wasn't willing to grind Koala Carnival because I hate this track too, and I still hate this track even after this patch. So we did 19 attempts as Excel, and then we did 9 attempts to beat it with speed. When I played as speed, it wasn't super bad, mostly it was just me getting more acclimated with speed once again after doing all of these runs with Excel. Had to get a little bit more familiar with it again, and was able to knock it out in a few attempts. The track's an oval, there's not much to say. Get the blue fire, don't lose it, cut the corners as close as possible. How good are you at NASCAR?
like little hard work.
Gingerbread Joyride with a 1:54.51. Hard track in general. 1:54 is a good time also, so gonna be pretty challenging. Honestly, just watch the video. Everything that I do is fairly self-explanatory. There's only one blue fire pad. Make sure you get that. Don't lose it. Cut your corners as much as possible. The jellies, again, like most obstacles in this game, are cycle based, so they're always going to be in the same spot as long as you're on the same pace. Keep that in mind. Megamix Mania. Anybody that came to my streams during the Rustlin GP knows that I actually loved this track and that I grinded the hell out of it and got my time to a fairly good time as Excel. As you can see, I attempted this time 34 times with Excel and I was still half a second slower than it. It is possible with Excel. The acceleration world record is a 203 something, so 100% possible, but I couldn't do it, honestly. And I had already been going for about 7 hours, so I just wanted to be done. So I switched to speed, and even then, because this track is not actually super simple, it took me a few tries to actually nail down even as speed. This is a pretty respectable time. I would actually probably put it at one of the hardest ones in the entire game, I would say. So if you're struggling with that, definitely good luck. But the time trial guide that I actually did put out for Megamix, even though it is not as fast as the developer time, will help you out to be able to knock it out, because what I used in that time trial guide is the same stuff that I used to beat the developer time as speed. Drive-Thru Danger 150-85. I was pretty concerned about this track too. This track is actually super difficult, and I was really concerned that the time was going to be really good because they've been fairly optimized so far, especially on these bonus tracks. Thankfully, this one's a 150, which is probably a little bit too easy, but it's still a very respectable time. If you can nail down a 150 in general, I would say that's going to be pretty good. This track in general is super complex. All I can say is just kind of pay attention to the video. There's way too much stuff going on. But one tip that I will give is, so if you're struggling to maintain reserves in the very beginning section before you hit Blue Fire, you might want to consider using the burger side. But if you want to cut some time, the pizza side is the faster one. Okay, so now that the dev times are done, we're going to be showing off the master wheels a little bit while I talk a little bit candidly about the developer times. People asked me a lot how I felt about the developer times. I'm pretty happy with where they are. Honestly, I would say they're actually harder than what I expected for the majority of them. I was not expecting to have to switch to speed. Well, again, like I said at the beginning, you don't have to. They're actually all doable with acceleration, but I wasn't expecting them to be basically world record level if you were to try to go excel for some of the courses. So I'm happy with that, honestly. I think it may be way too hard for the majority of players to be able to beat, but at the same time, it's supposed to be a challenge to kind of show mastery, so I can kind of see it. It is also very comforting to see that the developers were actually good at the game, like genuinely. That was something that was a concern, was like, wow, are the velo times basically as good as the developers were? Because I'm hoping not. I feel like these times were recorded kind of recently though, in that they weren't recorded like prior to the game coming out, like how most developer times are. I mean, this is kind of obvious as the, bonus tracks came out post-launch, so obviously they had to do it more recently, but more so what I'm getting at is like the Dingo Canyon Inner SC was changed on this patch. Like, it's actually fairly doable. It used to be obviously doable, but it was a pain to try to do. And with this patch, when the dev times come out, it's now a lot easier to actually pull off. So I'm curious if basically the developers said, okay, let's knock out some really good times to put out for the developer times, and they started doing some of these tracks and they're like, wow, some of these walls are very frustrating. And they fixed some. And I alluded to this with the Roost Tubes one, where the developer didn't take that inner shortcut. And that wall is a very big pain. And it feels like if they would have tried to take that inner shortcut, they would have realized what the problem is with that inner shortcut. It's not the shortcut itself, it's the way that the wall is. But in general, again, I'm really happy with actually where the times are. They're really challenging. For the majority of the people, it's not even going to be accessible in my opinion. Like it's going to be generally really hard to do all of the dev times. For some of the courses, I think a lot of people are going to be able to knock out, you know, a handful of them without too much effort. But to get all of them, it's honestly pretty good. If you can knock all of these out, like, you should definitely be patting yourself on the back. Don't let, like, actual world record holders sit back and say, oh, these aren't really good times. Because honestly, they are. They are very respectable times, save for, like, 2 or 3 courses. So that's really all I have to say about the dev times. Is I'm more than happy with where they ended up. I was impressed in general with the times that they laid down, and they were definitely a challenge. I mean, I made it harder on myself to play as Excel, you know, but it's something that I'm used to because, you know, I've played acceleration this whole time. I'm not very used to speed, which, you know, became apparent on like Megamix, especially for watching the stream. You know, I had to switch to speed, but then also I had to basically relearn how to use speed to be able to do that track, because that track's not simple. So that's really all I'm going to say about all of this. I wish everybody good luck while doing these developer times, and I will see you guys next time.